Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Hope for Healing Network. This is Cecily Henderson. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am super excited to present our first expert talk in the Hope for Healing Network, and also my co-host, Tammy Hall. She is joining me today. I'm super excited to introduce her. She is a functional medicine practitioner specializing in several different specialties in functional medicine. So welcome, Tammy. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm super excited because when I met you, you and I both had something in common. We have functional medicine. Both of us are functional medicine practitioners, as well as breast implant illness thrivers. We've gone through a myriad of health issues, struggling, trying to overcome, different ailments, and we just connected, which was great. So I wanted to have everyone just kind of understand that we are not doctors. We are functional medicine practitioners, so we cannot diagnose, we cannot tell you what to do. We are here for educational purposes and to give you our expertise, our knowledge based on our experience, based on our education. And it's just a great way to give you the knowledge to be informed and empowered to make decisions about your health. Because there's a lot of information out there in the media and on Facebook. And so we want to give you some viable, real researched information. And today's topic of discussion is one size does not fit all, how genetics shape our healing journey. So Tammy, I guess with this topic, we were discussing that none of our clients are one size fit all, right?
No, complex.
And genetics are very, very complex. Each person has, different microbiome, which is good and bad bacteria. They have different DNA. The things that are called genetic mutations, SNPs, which are variants of your genetics, different biochemistries. All of these things play a significant role in how your body responds to healing. So this is why I wanted to talk about this, because there's a lot of different things being offered online. And so we want to give you the education to help you make informed decisions. So the first topic I wanted to discuss was, what is genetic individuality? And how does it affect your healing? So basically, genetic individuality refers to a unique combination of different genes that make up a person. And this is what we kind of want to talk about today, is that you are unique and nobody is going to respond the same as another person to a healing treatment or a healing modality or a supplement or even foods, right?
Absolutely.
So based on your experience, what have you found with your clients as far as their individuality? Because I know that you work with a lot of clients that have different struggles, right, that they are going through with their health.
Mhm. I work with those with very complex autoimmune issues. Some of those things are breast implant illness, mast cell activation, Lyme's, mold, you name it, lots of different things. I don't have the same plan for everyone. The one thing that is consistent is I do try to work within their budget. I appreciate being able to have tests and data to help support the coaching plans. However, it's not 100% necessary. And sometimes you can figure those things out as you go. But it's definitely great to have that information in front of you, especially when the genetics are more focused. Excuse me. You have to kind of decide, am I going to test something I can't do anything about? Or, how do we narrow this focus down, right? So there's a lot of decision making that goes within that for an individual person, as well as a very detailed history, even all the way back to childhood, because your epigenetics start in your childhood. So
Right.
all of those factors are definitely a contributor to
And
figuring
I,
out.
I love that you brought it up because with me, I have to take a full health history
Yes.
of the clients because it does really determine on what kind of plan or the path that you take them. And so I just want people to know that your genetics and doing your own history or looking at your history is really important when you decide to do work with somebody or do a certain supplement or a diet, right? You need to look at your genetics.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are certain genetics where gluten isn't going to agree with you. There are certain genetics where you can't drink caffeine. It's really a gamut of things, and it supports lifestyle as well as what supplement might be best for you, what supplement might not be best for you, and agree with your body. So, yeah, definitely very important factors.
Yeah, and it's interesting because not only does the food affect us or supplements, it's our environment, right? So our environment can also affect us based on our genetics. You could have a variant or a mutation that causes you not to be able to break down those toxins, which is called methylation, right? So your
Yes.
detoxification processes and pathways can be blocked based on your genetics. And so people are, they go through these detox programs and they're like, oh, this is great. This is wonderful. And then they swell up or they have they feel flu like, or they just feel so awful. And it's because your genetics, based on your individuality,
Mhm.
you can't break those things down as well as someone else. And people just don't understand that this plays a big role in that.
Right. And, when you have genetic testing, sometimes going the 23andMe route where you're getting a whole gamut of so many things, that might be a little bit too much and a little bit too much overkill, right? And like you have this gene, it doesn't mean you're going to develop a certain condition or not. I absolutely believe that genes can be turned off and on. And I've personally experienced that, and I've also witnessed it working with my clients. So just because you may have a genetic SNP that points to a certain condition or struggling with detox or things like that, it doesn't mean there isn't anything you can do. That's where the individuality comes in for you as an individual on developing your plan and coaching you through that.
Thank you for bringing up that point because I think people get discouraged, right? When they
Mhm.
think, oh, well, I'm just predispositioned to have cancer or have diabetes. And it's a struggle. But both you and I know that you can turn those gene expressions off. You can, but
Yep.
it's utilizing the correct or not correct, the whatever is individual for that person, what is right for you,
Mhm.
that's going to help you, and then putting that plan together. And so people that are listening and watching, these types of talks that we're having, I mean, there's a lot of science behind it,
Mhm.
but you remember, your body better than anybody else.
Absolutely.
And so listening to your body is the most important thing that you can do. And that's what I always tell my clients is, I can give you a suggestion, I could give you some education, but if you're not listening to your body, then you're not doing what's right for you. So that's the number one thing.
Absolutely. It's more than just genetics, right? It's genetics, it's childhood, it's exposures, it's mind body, you're a whole person, right? So it's not just one path in planning and supporting.
Right, exactly. And going back to detoxification, genes can also affect your metabolism, can affect the way that you absorb your nutrients. The different SNPs and variations of DNA it affects our body, how we have our glutathione levels. Glutathione is the master antioxidant the body produces to break down the toxins, break down the chemicals you're exposed to in your food and in your environment. And so if your body doesn't have enough of these particular antioxidants or opening your detoxification pathways, you're going to have a more difficult time. And that's when people get discouraged. So being able to have a plan and know exactly what your body needs to open those detoxification pathways is very, very empowering, right? I mean, I've done it for myself. I know you've done it for yourself
Yep.
and
Yep.
for your clients. And it's so nice to be able to have those answers to healing, and finding those things that work best for you.
Right, absolutely. And since you mentioned glutathione, there's also a SNP that you may not tolerate glutathione, right? So that's where individuality comes in, and genetics play a role there too.
Well, I love genetics. That's one of the big thing, that is a big deal to me. I'm a nutrigenomics practitioner, and just for people, so genetic mutations, I'm going to give you a little definition so people understand. A genetic mutation is a permanent alteration of your DNA sequence. So it's altered. It just means that you're going to be more predispositioned to certain illnesses. Doesn't mean you're going to have it, but there are studies showing that when you have, gene variants, which is a SNP, and then a mutation, you can have a greater risk for these diseases. And so that's why it's important to look at your family history. Where does your DNA come from, right? It comes from your family, your ancestors. And I always ask people, well, do you know anything about your family history? Because, what if your great grandfather was a dairy farmer, and, that's passed down, and you're being told that, oh, you just need to be on a vegan diet, when your ancestors grew up on a dairy farm with milk, with meat, and this is ingrained in your DNA. And so looking at that from a genetics perspective, as well as food, is really important as well. And I guess it's just not, a lot of people don't understand how important that is.
Absolutely. And that also plays into epigenetics, right? You mentioned farming. So you think about family history. If there's health problems, where did they start? What type of exposures have they had? There's where the epigenetics come in. So all those factors, absolutely.
Yeah, and which is, I think it's fascinating, and we'll probably have another talk about epigenetics at some point, just because it is starting to come to the forefront in science, and more doctors and physicians are recognizing epigenetics.
Mhm.
But one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about genetics today is I'm getting a lot of people asking me, hey, is this supplement good for me? Is this therapy good for me? And, my friend took this and it worked great for her or him. And, can it help me? And so what I wanted to discuss was that, there could be two people taking the same supplement, doing the same diet, but have completely different reactions or results. And I wanted to break it down for people, why is that? And this is based on studies that what happens is there are proteins inside the cells that regulate signals called coming in from what's called cell receptors. They're pronounced, it's basically broken down, they're called GPCRs. Now, these GPCRs are the different proteins in the cell can cause people to respond differently, which is why one person might react with a rash and the other person might have energy. And so it's based on these proteins, and there is a real big science about it. And so understanding your genetics is really important. And thinking, oh, I'm going to respond the same way as my friend. Well, it's not true, because the science says that you might have a different response. And I'm going to put in some of these studies in the comments. So if people are interested, they're very welcome to look at these studies, but just know that you might not have the same reaction as your friend to a supplement or a therapy. And do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll add to it. If you're a visual person and you think of your cells have little doors on them. And depending on your genetics and your SNPs, sometimes when something shows up to open that cell door, it doesn't work right. That might be the way for one person. For the next person, when something shows up, that cell door may open and be very receptive and your body processes through it. So genetics play a role there too. Sometimes it's just an alteration of certain activities or a certain combination of foods to get those cell doors to open correctly. So if you have those things, it's not that they can't be worked with, it can. But that just kind of visually, if you think of how your cells work, that's what shows up at those receptor sites.
Yeah, I love that visual. Eventually, I would love to get a PowerPoint or some slides up there for people to see visually, because it is much better if you have something visual for people to see. So I do appreciate that visualization, because it can get a little, for anybody, it can get a little complicated with the science. But you brought up a good point, food, right? How the food, especially people that have food sensitivities, how is our genetics affecting our food sensitivities? So that's, if you wanted to talk a little bit about that.
Wow, we could have an hour on that. So if you think about what's the root cause of the sensitivity, and there's so many things that go into it. Epigenetics, inflammation is huge. Mast cell dysfunction, you name it. There's so many layers to it. But I think it's just, sometimes it's just, the testing is very, very helpful, right? But if you add another layer to that, so say someone who has mast cell activation, sometimes the testing misses things. So you have to play around with food a little bit more in trying some elimination type techniques to figure out that even though the testing might be negative for this, how does this individual person respond to it? And then you try to reset the body, if you will, and get it to not have the same response every time that food shows up. That
Dear, I think I might have. So Tammy is right now in a storm. So if we loop, there we go. Just lost signal for a second there. We got you back.
So sorry.
No, you're fine. You have some storms going on right now. So
I do. I live remotely in the middle of the mountains right now as part of my healing journey, and we've got some storms going on outside. So I apologize.
no, I just appreciate you being here. And so you mentioned something called mast cell activation. Would you just kind of explain a little bit about that?
So every single one of us have mast cells, and that's MAST. And they line everywhere from our body down to our bones. And it looks different for everyone when those mast cells start to
Oh dear. I think we lost her again. Anyway, those mast cells are the first line of defense for our immune system. And so when the signals for the mast cells, oh, sorry, we lost you again.
I'm so sorry. What did you hear last?
It's okay. When you were about to explain what mast cells are, that's when we lost you.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine.
We all have mast cells that line our entire body, from our brain to our gut to our bones. And when mast cells start to dysfunction, there are things that go into that, right? So the root cause is usually inflammation, but what causes the inflammation, right? Many times it's many layers of toxicity, and chemical sensitivities will develop, food sensitivities will develop, and this looks different for everyone. When the mast cells start to get dysfunctional, sometimes it's localized to people's gut and they have diarrhea, but then the gut talks to everywhere, right? The gut talks to the brain, It talks to everywhere. So that also may present as brain fog. It may present as rashes. It presents differently on everyone. It can also be extremely systemic, where it impacts your cardiovascular system, your respiratory system, where you have severe anaphylaxis. It's a really important cell. It's like our soldiers in our body. And the soldiers show up, but they're kind of smoking, drinking, and partying is what they were described to me when I was diagnosed, right? That was a great analogy, because
love
they
it.
are the soldiers in your body. And when they're working right, they do an amazing job. When they're dysfunctional, they can really cause a lot of havoc on your body. And that will also start to present as sensitivities, food, chemicals, laundry soap, perfume, super common. So when they start to get dysfunctional, it's many layers to start working through. A lot of times, though, the dysfunction starts at toxicity, or you hear a lot about this since COVID as well. I think it started getting more attention with COVID because that also caused some mast cell dysfunction. Limes, mold, all those types of things can cause your immune system to start getting overreactive and start responding poorly to things that normally wouldn't if your mast cell was in check.
Yeah, and this is important for people to understand, because a lot of doctors, physicians do not completely understand about mast cell activation syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is very difficult to diagnose.
Yeah.
And you do need to go to a specialist or someone, or a functional medicine practitioner that works with it, like you, Tammy. You work with.
That's how I was diagnosed, and it took years until I landed at functional medicine door, and then it was diagnosed. I could start working with it.
Yeah, and it is very difficult. It's a difficult journey, but the good thing, I had mast cell activation syndrome. I was able to calm down my mast cells. So, it's possible, you can do it, but it is a journey, and taking the proper steps in order to help calm your system down.
Absolutely. It also, it adds another layer. Like you mentioned, supplements and food. It adds another layer to how you need to approach those things. Someone who doesn't have those issues may be able to take one supplement and they tell you how amazing it is and how wonderful they responded to it. But if you have mast cell, you might not respond in the same way, or you may need to approach it differently if you're going to try it. So it's really important to have that guidance if you have that extra layer going on in your body.
Thank you for bringing up that point. This has been such a wonderful expert talk with you, because I know that your information, it's so informative. You're so well versed in what you do and helping your clients, especially those that are really struggling, right, with food sensitivities, or like you said, brain fog, and some of these other symptoms that happen, and people don't realize this is a real these are real symptoms. It's not just old age. It's not, oh gosh, I'm just, I'm feeling a little achy today because of the weather. No, these are real symptoms based on a systemic response. So what would you recommend for people if they suspect that they have mast cell activation? Talking to how do they talk to their doctor about it? I know that they can connect with you, but what do they discuss with their doctor if they suspect something like this?
So this is the tough thing. And it's just, it's not because they don't want to help. It's that they maybe don't understand, because mast cell presents so incredibly differently for so many people. And then a lot of times, the testing that we have that's specific for mast cell activation is poor. There's over 1,000 mediators identified at this time, but we have testing for very limited number of them. And some doctors approach it as, well, that test was negative, so you don't have it. That's not true. You have to really, really look at a clinical picture, the entire clinical picture. That's why the history is so incredibly important, going back to childhood, back to epigenetics exposures along your lifetime. We walk around with a barrel, and that barrel keeps getting filled up the more we encounter things. So history is super, super important. And having someone who is extremely skilled clinically and diagnosing that, because as I said, the testing is very poor. So a lot of times it is diagnosed based on clinical presentation and symptoms. So the place to start is with someone who is very well versed in getting that diagnosis or suspecting that diagnosis. After that, your plan becomes individualized in how you respond to things, supplements, medications. Sometimes people with mast cell can't take a regular prescription. They need to have compounded medications, special nutrition plans, elimination plans to figure that out, testing, because your gut often becomes broken down and inflamed, which can create a whole host of problems like SIBO, leaky gut, lots of things. So it's many, many layers, and it often takes an integrated approach. So working with that very skilled functional medicine doctor that can diagnose, and then nutrition, functional nutrition around it is also very, very important. So it's a multifaceted approach, and it can be complex. It can take years, but it's not hopeless. It can take time. There was a point I could not retain a thought for 30 seconds, and it couldn't work at all. So, and that was starting in 2019. So look where I am now.
Yeah, you've come such
You know,
a far way.
We can make
in long-
progress.
Exactly. Yeah, both of us. I mean, we both had mast cell activation, and
Mhm.
here we are today as a testimony that you can heal.
Yes.
You can have hope through functional medicine, through holistic practices, and working with somebody that understands, right? Understands what you're going through and has that knowledge and expertise. So Tammy, thank you so much for joining us. If people want to, if they want to get in touch with you, if they want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to connect?
So I am in the process of rebranding, but currently my business name is Halls Educating and Consulting. My website is hallsec.squarespace.com. Otherwise, I'm also on Facebook under Halls Educating and Consulting. Or otherwise, you can just give me a call, 763-807-7798. All my contact information is listed on my website as well.
Right. Thank you so much, Tammy. And I'm definitely going to have you back. We're going to talk about some more of these topics, such as microbiome, right? Because I know that that's what I work with is microbiome and mold. I had mold exposure, was very sick for a long time, went back to school, got some CME credits, and now working with clients that have, it's called spore sickness. That is the term that is recognized in the medical community as spore sickness. So we have lots of topics to discuss. And I'm so excited that you're here. Very excited to introduce the Expert Talks into the Hope for Healing Network. We want you to heal. We want you to feel that hope that despite whatever you're going through, you can feel better. And we want to give you the education. Like I said, we can't diagnose or recommend anything, but we can give you the education to empower you to make the best decisions for yourself and your body. So thank you again, Tammy.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, wishing you a wonderful and blessed day.